Good morning, everybody. So good to see you. Come on, high five everybody around you as you take your seat. It is so good to see every single one of you here today. We want to welcome you out on the Super Bowl Sunday. We're going to have a lot of movement on the stage right now. I need to create a distraction, apparently, while we have a lot of movement. I would love, I know introverts, I'm sorry, I'm going to pre-confess sorriness. I would love for you to turn to your favorite person next to you and just ask them, how long have you been coming to the Father's house? And what do you love about this family? Then you turn to your least favorite person and you ask the same question. Come on, just ask. Just ask them, how long have you been coming? How long? And what do you love about this church family? Come on, don't giggle. Don't giggle, go like, hey, ha, ha, ha. No, ask them, how long? What do you love about this church family? And we're going to get everybody up on this stage. You probably think we have sold out to the Buffalo Bills, right? You go like, what is happening? Are they paying you? Well, first of all, I don't know much, but I have watched the slow motion in the last footage, and we should be in the Super Bowl. Come on. And I'm going to make sense of why everybody is sitting here. I'm going to make sense of why we're all wearing these snazzy blue shirts. Pastor Doug here said to me, you really want me, you know I'm what's Brown? Cleveland. Yeah, he says Brown, Cleveland Browns. He says, I'm a die-hard Cleveland. I got put on the shirt, put it on. It is so good to see every one of you. We apologize that online is off. It's not us. The servers somewhere has got a meltdown. I don't know if it's snow, whatever it is. But here we are. And it's good to be in God's house. It really is. You know, we've been talking about threads. Not threats, threads. A single thread. And the beauty of our lives being like threads. Last Sunday's message is so pivotal, and we're going to continue with that story. But today, we're going to journey through the mystery of God holding the threads. And he says this, humans brainstorm and plan many things, but it's the purposes of God that will prevail. Which means we see our lives as planned. Have you ever considered that many of the things in your life is an intentional God collision of the ordinary that is not ordinary? The people you meet, who you are, where you live. Because you see, once we understand that God has purpose, and we're going to discover this in this series, then we begin to look at our lives through a different lens. There is this beautiful, beautiful piece that I'm going to read to you on threads. Rufus, keep playing that. The mystery of threads, Rufus, is what it's called. So you've got to change the key. Here we go. Oh, I feel it. Every thread of our lives, every story, every experience, every seemingly random dot is intrinsically woven together to form a greater narrative. What may feel like disconnected moments are, in truth, a plot that points to a grand story, leading us towards the discovery of our life's meaning. Like a masterful author, life reveals its purpose not in isolated events, but in how these moments connect over time. Each joy, challenge, and coincidence shapes the arc of our journey, guiding us to uncover the deeper truth of who we are and what we have to do. Because when you live through life, there's so many things that happens that you actually question God. If you're a good God, why did this happen? And God clearly states, in my time, I will make it beautiful. And in my time, what was meant for evil, I will turn it to good. And in my time, what seems like a random detour actually carries moments that you need for the grand journey that leads forward. And the most frustrating thing is when you are in a detour and you go like, this does not make sense. Can I tell you something about the gift of age? That you begin to give God thanks for where He didn't allow you to go, and you begin to understand all the random reasons you had to do things, because He makes all things beautiful. Now, Paul says this, God is the master architect. Come on, just shout architect. We are the builders. He says, and we can choose with what we build. He says, you can build with stubble, you can build with brick, you can build with whatever. He says, but everything will be tested by fire to show what you've built with. But God is the master architect. Can I tell you something about an architect? An architect designs something, and the builder cannot say, I don't like what you designed. If you don't, you can't build. Because the architect's not going to say, oh, I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings, builder. What would you like? Here is the thing that you and I need to understand. God has a story and a plan for your life, for His church here at the Father's house. And I want to take you back 25 years. Are you ready? Come on now, stay with me, 25 years. Some of you are 22, you can't fathom 25. Some of you don't know what a VHS cassette tape is, and what an 8-track is in a Chevy. You don't know what that stuff is. You don't even know what a fax machine is. 25 years ago, I grew up, Marlies grew up in South Africa. Both our families as pastors, friends, not her mom and dad, they were very successful business people. She promised you'll never marry a pastor. Never say never. That's all I'm going to tell you. My dad's got a large church. We stayed right next to it. My brother came on staff with my dad. And it was the obvious thing that I would come on staff and live this family legacy. But this thread, called Pierre, never fitted their quilt. You know, when you go like, I always do the wrong thing, and I always want to change the picture of their quilt. But God had a different plan for my thread, my Lisa's thread, and that of our children. So long story short, in 1999, we came over to Rochester, New York. We didn't know where Rochester is. I took a map. There was no chat GPT. I took a physical map. You know, physical, remember those? You get a AAA, right? And I looked and I go like, look, it's close to a dam. They're so beautiful. We didn't know there's snow here. Are you kidding me? I've never seen snow in Africa. Until I was 33, I've never seen snow. If they told us what we're waiting for snow, you know, God is so kind. We go like, oh, this is so fun. But the one desire I have is, God, please let it be a big, thriving church. That was my desire. When we came to the airport here in Rochester, went to the Holiday Inn. Remember that Holiday Inn was a dump. Oh, my Lord. Right? It's a dump. you pray at night that you don't get your organs stolen, you know? And I said to Marlies, I want you to pray, and I'm going to go walk and pray. Before I see the church and the people, I want to know what God says. Otherwise, if it doesn't fit what I envision, I'm going to interpret what I think I need to hear to get out of it. So I walked around the dump, and I'm praying. And I couldn't understand why there's a bulldozer, but there's no construction. Never knew that's what removes the snow. I'm confused. No construction, and this dump and the bulldozer. And I pray and pray and pray and pray and pray. And I'm hearing nothing. I got back in the room and she says, I think I heard it from God. I said, okay, now how do you know it's from God? Have you ever heard people say, oh, God spoke to me? You go like, okay, how? Like, was it audible? How, right? There's something that we've always said as we were getting married. We rent a home and Marlies says, oh, let's plant flowers, why make it pretty? I always said this, you never plant a garden unless you plan to stay. That's what I always said. When you put roots down, that's when you plant a garden. So she opened the Bible and she read, plant a garden, plan to stay, and pray for the peace of the city. In that moment, now I go like, oh, I know this is God. Because nobody knows about this plant a garden and plan to stay business. Now I go like, please Jesus, let it be a big church. Please Jesus, let it be a big church. And as we drove up to the church, it was not a big church. And I go like, oh Lord. But now, it's the master builder's plan. It's the architect's plan. And we began to serve the community, and I was the worship leader, the tech guy, the drama guy, and preached a little bit guy, and did everything until we were invited to lead the church. The one thing I can tell you about the community, it was a community that loved Jesus. The room didn't even seat 200 people. It's across the street. I remember the Sundays we would put the rows so far apart you could roll an elephant between the row. You could have it's like IMAX. We just need food and extended chairs. There was not a lot of people, but we began to sense the architectural plan of God, and the architectural plan that God gave us is to be very aware that the Father's house calling is always on those on the outside. Those who don't always find a place of normality and acceptance. Listen, nothing against any church. I believe every church has an assignment that God gives them. Specifically, that's why no churches is ever alike, because there is an assignment. I was clear that this church is going to celebrate a multicultural, multi-people, multi-everything. There's going to be an equality with women and men. Children's going to be seen. And when people come in, no matter what they look like and who they are, I will protect them with my life. And if people are not happy about that, I understood that it's going to take a price. And many people left because they go like, you just care about other people. I go like, no, but they're at risk, and that's our assignment. Oh, so many beautiful things happened during that time. Oh, things began to grow. We didn't have lights like this. We had like 6 lights, and you had to put out a 30-foot ladder every Thursday to turn the light if anybody moves on the stage. Oh, it was so amazing. It was the greatest thing, and then it just flatlined. And I cannot tell you that feeling that pastors sometimes feel when it's so dead in the room that you can literally. This is how I knew my kids were asleep, when I read them stories. I read the story in the way it should be read, according to me. And then when I think they're asleep, I go like, and then the prince from if they don't stop and say, what? I know they're out as lightning. And during that time, I felt I could preach and all of a sudden just keep going like, and nobody would say, what? And in desperation, I went under the stairs, sitting next to broken air conditioners. And I said, God, I can't do this. I can't resurrect, can't give life. And in the corner was a cassette, VHS cassette. For those who don't understand it, go Google it. And it was about prayer. And that moment I realized that this church, the secret of the future, is for it to be on its knees in a praying church. That's why Saturday prayer is not casual. As we pray, so we see lives changed. And the church began to grow. But here's the thing, we were radical in our approach, right? So radical. And I said, let's paint one wall in the church black. And then I'm going to preach this message series called Secret Sins. And then I'm going to have this moment and tell everybody, go on the wall and write down your secret sin. They go like, that's, who the heck's going to do that? I go like, okay, let's put a curtain in front of it. And then what I want you to do, go first service. And if nobody writes it, I want you to just write a fake sin there, just to keep the ball rolling, all right? Just get it going. After the first service, there was not enough space on the wall that people wrote. And then we made this big box and say, everything that's in your house that you know is a pathway to sin, bring it and put it in the box. The box filled. We had to get 2 boxes. And we had to create a spring lid so you can't see what's in the box, because I stared in that box. It scared the living heck out of me. And the ganja smell was overwhelming. It was, you just go there between services. And yeah, you know what I mean? It was just, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just telling you what happened. It was this radical, beautiful thing of following the impulse of God through the years. And in that little building, we grew to 1,600 people in 6 services. 2 on a Saturday, 4 on a Sunday. Bible school. First Hillsong, offsite, Bible school. We're so hardcore, you can't be a small group leader or a volunteer leader if you don't go through 34 weeks of Bible school, 2 hours, and you're going to write an exam and memorize scripture. But can I tell you something? It's the biggest transformation I've seen in people's faces and lives during that time. And the church grew. This was a farm where we were at. The story behind how God brought the threat of the farm into play, and we're going to tell those stories as we progress down this journey, is miraculous. And now we plan to build this building, and we're looking for $2 million from the bank. And every time we meet with the bank look at me and go like, how old are you? And I was 33, and we're just looking for $2 million. But this building is a $12.5 million project. I thought the mortgage is going to be what we are currently paying for RG&E a month. But can I tell you another story? I went back in the room under that same stairs, because every day I went there, every day. To this day, I go to the sacred place, because I know that's where God gives clarity of what needs to happen. That's where you stare at the master plan and know what you've got to build. And I remember I came out of that room and I literally said to God, how are we going to build this building? How are we going to do it? And it was full. I came to my car, and a $20 bill blew to my feet in the wind. I still got it framed to this day. And as I looked at this $20 bill, I heard this in my heart, a thought so predominant. As I've blown in this money, I will build my church. Can you move forward in that? And church, I can tell you story after story about from there to here. And I can tell you about all the things that God has done in the community. And listen, the amount of people that prayed and played and worked and did all these things. Some of them are sitting here and some of them are not here. And I honor every single person. And then on this building here, the steel was standing, and we wrote down the names of everybody we knew that needed to know Jesus, because this house is embedded in that Christ is good news, and we are here to share it, not become insulated and isolated. In this house, there is no equality or racism. There's no sexism. There's no barbed wire. There's no preaching against this. We're preaching for the transformation of the Holy Spirit. It's so beautiful. And then we launched the first multi-site downtown and Life Center. And we went online. We bought cameras. We had to actually break the walls to fit the cameras on a Sunday, because we wanted to be online and it was still dial-up. You watch me preach like that. But we realized that God gave us the desire to go first so other churches can believe they can follow second, right? With all of this technical stuff, do you understand that we had top of the state technical stuff? Our sound console was this big, a Behringer, this big. We had 4 lights. We didn't have this, but we had a glimpse of the master plan of what God wanted to do. And then 2012, remember, we went to the Blue Cross Arena at our 10-year celebration, and 11,000 people showed up. We looked at this and go like, oh God, build your church. You're doing great things. Don't mishear me. It's not in the numbers. It's in the influence and the impact that God does. I remember the Sunday that we baptized 600 plus people, and I was young and stupid. I felt, it's my celebration. I'm going to baptize all 600. And I did. It took like 4 hours, right? And nobody left. That next day, I had to tore muscle and I couldn't get out of bed. But build your church, Jesus. And everything went on and on. And then there was Sisterhood. Oh, tell us about Sisterhood a little bit, my love. Just turn it. That's the button.
Thank you. Wow, Sisterhood. Wow, you caught me unaware on that one. Actually, 2005, to those who remember, I think I had 2,000 of these bracelets made, A Beautiful Life. And if you're wearing one in the room today, we've had, yeah, look at that, yeah. And it was always a declaration that a beautiful life is not to be found in the things that we as humans often crave, but that it is in a perspective. And God gives us eyes to see the sacred in the ordinary. And in 2015, we started Sisterhood. And just, you know, under the radar, I am somebody made for building systems, processes. I never desired to build a women's ministry. I'd never seen many great role models, but I had a dream, which is a way God speaks to me. I don't know if anybody else is dreamers. Do we have any dreamers in the room? And many of you can remember the dream in 2015, and my heart was arrested. And God reminded me, you are not called to label my daughters. You are called to take one step. And we said this, Sisterhood is not an event, it is a way of being. And so the events were wonderful. We had fun. We're still going to have fun. But it was about women finding their identity as daughters of God.
Yeah. Sisterhood was, I loved Sisterhood. I came to every single one of them and sat up there. The women can get really down. And I can go on and on to all the beautiful things that God has done. And here we sit today. And there's a reality in the last 5 years that's been brewing in our hearts. In the last 3 years, there's been a blessed undoing. Because like you, my wife, my family loves the church. It's not our identity. It's our place of belonging. Can I say it again? The church is not my identity. I can sit right there next to you and still be part of the church. I don't need a special parking place. But I became concerned because, let me tell you, I don't know if it's for everybody, but we start out as wanderers. then we become warriors, then we become heroes when we fight really well, but then we become sages later in life. Now, sages in our culture is not celebrated because people think you can Google wisdom. You can't Google wisdom. You can Google knowledge and information, not wisdom. But there's a certain point where God paralyzes the warrior in you because he needs you to make room for new warriors so you can be a sage to the warriors, because the Bible says the battle is for the young, right? And I began to look at the Northeast and Christianity in the United States. It is not more concerning than before, but it's more concerning than before. When 25 years when this story started, there was a concern. You know what a concern is? If you see what is and you see what can be. If there's no tension between the two, you have no vision. Because it is the dissonance of knowing what can be and where we are, and knowing that God's desire is to make a difference. In 1972, they say that 90% of people in the United States profess to be Christians. Now, you can put a frame around that, but they say they are Christians. In 2025, only 64% of people say they are Christians. It's a big drop, and when you take it forward, the drop is even worse. But can I just break down to you of the 64% right now, the breakdown of numbers? Of that 64%, if you make that 100, 64% of that is over the age of 65. Almost 70% of people professing faith is over the age of 65. Now, I want you to know, for those over the age of 65, you are running well. You hear me? You are running well. But then, under the age, or age 36 to 64, there's 35% of those who say they are followers of Christ. Here is the big concern. Under the age of 35, only 14% say they are followers of Christ. And during COVID, you began to hear this word, the great exodus of young adults leaving church. Now, I'm going to say one thing, and then it's going to depress you, but then I have hope, okay? Are we good? So here comes the depressing part. Statistically, the children that comes to church in kids ministry and youth ministry that you bring faithfully, only 9% of them currently will remain in their faith. 9%. You play that forward in 20 years and you wonder what. But here's the good news. Build your church. Build it from the ground up. History says there was a dark age where Christianity was almost snuffed out. Listen, God breathes life and it resurrects the dead. God is a God that sometimes wait for things to die on the ground so he can resurrect through his spirit, not through argument. When God shows up, he doesn't need convincing. He can make dead things come to life. That's why I am not concerned. But can I tell you something? Strategically, I understand that if things don't shift, you can quote that scripture all day long, because here is the reality of where we are. You say, but if they're at risk, Pastor P, what does it mean? Oh, I love the scripture, and I've got one more. I thought I had two more, but it's one more. Listen to what God says about his city. He says, old men and old women will come back to Jerusalem. They sit on benches on the streets and spin tales. They move around safely with their canes. A good city to grow. Come on, it's funny. A good city to grow. The Father's house is a good city to grow old in. But then he says this, not only old in, and boys and girls will fill the public parks laughing and playing. And it's a good city to grow up in. In other words, God's desire is for his church to be a multi-generation church and thrive. But here is a truth that you can disagree with, But I have been a pastor now, I think, for 35, 36 years. And this is a natural occurrence that I believe God ordained. That whatever the age of a pastor is, my age, and you know I'm 26, right? My age, I have 5 to 7 years influence younger than me and 5 to 7 years influence over me, not in wisdom and connection, but in life familiarity. In other words, right now on this stage, empty nesters connect with us because we all speak the same language. When I was 33, parents with young kids connect with us. The 20-somethings connect with us. There was a point where we had over 300 students from Roberts Wesleyan here, and the president wanted to meet me to make sure I'm not a cult, right? Because there were so many young, because we young, they're young, and there's a connection. What does that mean to us? Well, the average age of senior pastors right now in the United States is 60, which means, take it 5 years either side, they have attractional influence over 55-year-olds and 65-year-olds. Not wisdom, not preaching power, but attractional power. In other words, here is the thing that I can tell you emphatically. We were driving down the street and Marlies once said to me, I was about 34, 35. She says, I'll know that you have grown up when you finally admit what you cannot be. And I go like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know, when you still, I'm going to show you, I can do anything. I can never play in the NBA, people. I can never, because your gifting defines you to where you fit in the body. Anybody that thinks they can be all things are deluded. They are self-deceiving. And here is the thing that I want you to know. I know that I know it is time to make a change so that we can reach young again and hold those who are growing old in the city. You know where I am right now? I am holding those who are growing older in the city. I'll only say it once. I'm stinking 58 years old. I'm not 33 anymore. And can I tell you something? Age does something to you. Where everybody goes like, let's do this thing. I go like, yeah. And then I lay under the crow's nest and go like, Jesus, let the rapture comes. But still, in dreams and hopes and aspirations, I'm going nowhere. Pastor Marlies is going nowhere. And for 3 years, we've prayed. We sat with the board and we began to see that it's time for these divine threads over our lives to come together and acknowledge the uncertainty with confidence that God wants to do something at the Father's house for the next 20 years. But in order to get there, change is needed. Now you go like, are you going to go? I've got no plan to go, but things are going to change. Because God says this, watch closely, I'm about to do a new thing. And it's happening. Come on, shout new thing. Come on, shout new thing. But can I show you something that's a cosmic joke? I want you to look at how we are wired. That is how humans respond to change. Look at that. There is a part of us, and I'm in one of those. I love chaos and change. Love it. If anything is done twice the same way, I'm bored already. I love innovation and change. And then there's people that are early adopters that goes like, this makes sense, let's go. But 84% of people are wired, they don't like change now. They need time to metabolize it. I love the last one that says, I want my fax machine back. You know the people that says, I will never wear that clothes. In 3 years, they have the clothes on, go like, what do you think of my new outfit? I'm it. Yeah, it's taken you 3 years to get there. And now, can I tell you something? It is part of God's design for your life, because if we were all early innovators, we would blow ourselves into pieces and fall off the cliff. Because it takes all of us to bring a balance to movement, moving with love and moving with the speed of life. So I want you to know, as I'm sharing this, I'm not expecting you to go like, this is the truth, and yes, I'm ready. No, I'm not expecting you to do that. But what I'm expecting you is to say, God, help me metabolize what is going. But here's what I can tell you. It's not a democracy. God is the master architect. And there is a story that he is building right now. So you say, Pastor P, what is the plan? And this is the last slide before I'm going to bring it closer home. The next one is bringing the future leaders of the Father's house into play. Marlies and I have been leading as the lead pastors here at the Father's house now for 25 years. But it's imperative for us in the next 3 years, shout 3 years. Not 3 days, 3 years. Come on, shout 3 years. In the next 3 years to transition from lead pastors to founding pastors at the Father's house. Which means over the next 18 months, I'll explain to you what's going to happen. And then over the next 18 months, there's going to be a role change. And you know what is so beautiful about that role change? It's not who's coming and who's going. It is about God's ongoing story, regenerative story. And I believe the vision that's in front of us for the next 20 years is to envision and find God's design for a next generational church where children and young adults and those under the age of 35 will find a commonality of the frequency of communication, of familiarity, belonging. And I can tell you this, I want you to know that I'm committed even though it's going to change and I may not like the way it is. But it's not about liking the style of music or preaching. It is about the fact I'll do anything for my children and grandchildren to know Jesus. I'll do anything to serve that because I'm not at risk. They are at risk. So you say, Pastor P, what does this mean? So the reason why we got the Buffalo Bills shirt on, and then I'm going to introduce you to what I see. The Buffalo Bills has been a team that should have been, we can put up that slide of the Buffalo Bill people. We got these shirts and I go like, okay, is it the blue ones or the red ones? And then I realized it was red and blue. I said, is it red with blue or is it blue with red? Not too sure. But then I said to CJ, okay, CJ, the beautiful analogy of the Buffalo Bill franchise, I believe it was found in 1960, right? And there has been great players throughout all these years that made the team great coaches. You know what I love about that concept? That every player that played, that got injured, their jerseys don't get retired because they've been injured. They are celebrated for what they've done. You know what is sad? Is when people play hard and they get injured in church, now we pretend like they were never part of us. Right? The second thing is, those who played for a season great will always be honored. They don't have to stay with the church until they die to be honored. And I want you to know we honor everybody that has worked, and many of them are not here. Their jerseys will remain, their names will remain, but glory goes to Jesus and Jesus alone. But here is the thing that you've got to understand, that right now, for the last 25 years, I've been with Pastor Marlies, the main coach. We've got to make the decisions, wade our way through tough things. But under us, first time I realized there are speciality coaches. The one that I confused me was the special team coordinator. I thought that's the snacks and the lemons and the Gatorade person. But all of them are speciality. They are very they're specialists in their field. And can I tell you something? Never think the Father's house is a company. Never think, oh, we just need to get a new CFO and things will run. No. But the church is complex. When you talk community, it is complex. When you talk serving, it's complex. When you talk worship, it's complex. It's not just a thing, but it is about the ongoing story. And our desire, and you can put up that last slide, is to bring on, and you're going to meet them in a second. They're going to move here in May and start in June. And for 18 months, they are going to be working with the speciality teams with the main focus starting off immediately on kids ministry, youth ministry, and young adults. And by God's grace, someone is given a large amount of money for a total renovation of the kids area. But it's not paint and breaking it down, church. It's understanding what the culture has done to our children and how the church can focus its energy and resources. Do you understand that as we grew, there were over 1,000 kids here on a weekend? And it's time for that thrust to happen. But you will see them work with multiple areas. So don't ask, oh, I don't know who the head coach is. No, I'm still the head coach. And they are becoming the head coach. But there's a lot to learn. So don't say to them, what are you focusing on? They've got to go through every area, because this is what you need to understand. God is the founder and the owner of the story. And when somebody else comes in, they don't bring their franchise to God's story. I didn't bring my franchise. I had to discover God's franchise. And that story is going to continue. And then at 18 months, round about then, I'm going to become the lead pastor with Pastor Malise, and we're going to serve. Founding pastor. And can I tell you about serving? It's not a hard thing for us because we're a serving church. This morning at 7 o'clock, I was on my knees cleaning this table. Sean says, can I help? I go like, Sean, I cannot tell you how much joy it gives me to do anything in the house of God. Anything is a good thing. There's the only one that's exalted in this place is Jesus. If you want to be great, learn to be a servant. So for us, this is not a shock. And then at the end of 3 years, I want you to hear me clearly. Pastor Malise and I will resign formally so that Pastor Doug and Stephanie can hear from the Lord, and we can see where the threads are going and whether there is a place for us to serve here. That's our desire, because we have no plan after 3 years. We're not selling our house. We're not moving. My desire is to still sit there and become a problem to you, drooling, hearing the story. Because you know what? The joy I hear, being a grandfather is better than being a father. And I can't wait to be a grandfather to the Father and celebrate the ongoing story of God here at the Father's house. So I want you to understand, this is not about us leaving and someone coming. This is about God's ongoing story and the divine thread of why you are here in this time, in this season, and in this place. Now the logical question, how did you arrive at Pastor Doug and Stephanie? And what was the process? I'm going to tell you this. It was a 3-year journey with a board, playing it according to the bylaws of the church. You are going to hear about the story because we're going to be telling that story. But today you need to understand this, that there are too many threads that just came together, that you realize this is not accidental. You can't make this up, because they planted a church 12 years ago in Ohio, church way over 1,000 people, and they had to hear from God whether they want to leave that. Their family is there. Their boys' grandparents are there. This is a big thing for them, because they're leaving something to come to something. And then somebody else needs to go lead their church and need to find somebody. And God supernaturally put all these beautiful threads together. So I want to tell you about Pastor Doug and Stephanie. And I don't want to give too much story, because you've seen Pastor Doug. But last night as we were sitting, by the way, they've got little boys, red ginger boys. They are so fun. You're going to meet them. I don't know, they know boundaries. They own the church. I love that. I love that. It's their home. But as we were sitting last night and we're talking about how our stories came together, because Pastor Doug came to this church trying to swindle our bookstore. It is true. He tried to swindle our bookstore to buy copies of his book. So he's requesting them, like, so many people want this book and I can't find it anywhere. But he's the writer of the book. Right? And then Pastor Luke found out he is a pastor. And I go like, oh, I would love to meet him. And they tell him, Pastor Pierre wants to meet with you after service. And he goes like, oh, dear Lord. But not knowing, I still have that picture to this day. Because after that, I became his pastor. And I've pastored their hearts through every season. But as we were sitting there last night, talking about all these beautiful connections of our story, their story, his wife Stephanie says, oh, I have a song in my head. It's that song from Prince of Egypt, that song of the threads, the magic threads. And she began to sing. I go like, you better learn that song. So Stephanie, you've got to sing it. Explain to us what that is about, and then please sing it.
When I first heard that you were talking about sacred threads and this story and how God weaves the story together, have you guys seen The Prince of Egypt? Classic. And I thought of the song that Jethro sings to Moses, and he's saying, hey, your story is important. Like, you've got something here. And he says, a single thread in a tapestry, though its color brightly shines, can never see its purpose in the pattern of the grand design. And the stone that sits on the very top of the mountain's mighty face, does it think it's more important than the stones that form the base? So how can you see what your life is worth and where your value lies? You can never see through the eyes of man. You must look at your life through heaven's eyes.
Beautiful. And we were eating ice cream, and the candles were burning, and our dogs were jumping on them, and we were talking about sacred threads and how 2,000 years ago the Apostle Paul wrote to a church like this, to Corinth, and he said, you are the body of Christ, and every part has a role. And I think if Paul was sitting here today, he'd say, Father's house, you are a living body, and every part has a role. And the truth is, Pierre and I have had the privilege to lead this church and serve in this body for 25 years. But the truth is, we've never done it alone. Behind us, here, in front of us, sacred threads. I remember the day I met these two, and I wrote in my notes a letter that I can't wait to share with CJ and Cass. I think it was August the 2nd, 2020. And a sacred thread about their presence dropped into my spirit. And I can talk about every person on this stage because, you know, Pierre's mom is an avid tapestry person. She's done close to 1,000. And if you look at somebody who's threading a tapestry, if you ever looked at the backside, it's terrible. It's chaotic. It weaves go across. It makes no sense. But the one who's designing it, they have that perfect picture. And so this is not a story about God removing a thread. This is a story about God weaving what is needed for his church, what is needed for his body, what is needed for this region. And I want to echo Pierre's words. Being part of God's house and serving in God's house, that's not what I do. It's who I am. No matter where I sit on this beautiful horizon. And so I want to just publicly thank you, Doug. And I want to thank you, Stephanie, for saying yes. And I want to welcome you into what I believe is one of the most beautiful houses, most beautiful bodies that I ever have seen.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, Doug, here we sit, you and me, and I'm so glad we're the same size. Because it would be terrible if I had to sit under your arm. No, I'm just messing with you. You've been a pastor long. There is something that is so important to me that I said to Pastor Doug. I said there's two things that's non-negotiables, deal breakers. The first thing, never while I'm alive will anybody lead this church and build their personhood as the brand and the identity of the church. Never. I don't want on every flyer, Jesus is the brand of his church. And I'm not criticizing but this house. And I said the other ones, that's a non-negotiable. Is you and I'm going to meet in the sacred place of prayer. Because if there's one thing that I want to make sure is that never gets broken. Because then I know we will hear the master plan of God. But you had some big decisions. And what happened that you heard and go like, I'm going to give up what is thriving, or not give up, lay it down?
Well, the good news is, first, I have more of a radio face than a TV face, so we don't have to worry too much about the promotional items. It won't draw many people in, so that's a good thing. Don't say yeah to that. Come on, Joe. Hurt my feelings a little bit here. Stephanie and I have deep love for the Father's house. We love you because first we loved your pastors, because they're our pastors. Every Sunday when I'd be done with our services, I would go down to my little basement gym and want to quit and give up because ministry's hard. Not here. I've heard you guys are so easy, so I'm not worried about that whatsoever. But the idea is, like, I would be in moments where I'd be like, God, and I would put on Pastor Pierre on a Sunday afternoon, and it would minister to my soul. And so when he called me a few years ago to begin to pray, I felt overwhelmed, and I said to the Lord, you know me too well, because the only person who could ever call me to leave my home would be him. And so we've watched the tapestry of God weave, and we surrendered to the Lordship of Jesus in this moment, and we said, God, we owe the church that we have pastored for all these years nothing but love, but we owe you nothing but obedience. And you are making room for us in this space, so we humbly come in this space to serve and to learn and to just come alongside what has been so beautiful for the last 25 years. And we just pray that we get to bring our part to that story and to serve this wonderful community that we've been praying for. And we're excited for what God is going to do. So thank you for giving us room in this house.
Oh, I love that. And you know what I love about this church, this body of believers? We don't seek reasons to disqualify people. We are the disqualified that's been qualified by grace. And we come along each other and make each other better, because there is no person with no amount of gifting that God will ever allow to do it all. It's through all of us. So as you are processing, My prayer is that as you drive home, that you would pause with your logical thoughts and ask God to help you metabolize it through His eyes. That you would understand that if you are very slow to change, right now you see all the problems. And I want to say one problem that I know people will ask. Why should we have 2 pastors for 3 years? Why should we pay 2 salaries when they're going to do kind of the same thing? That was a big thing. So I prayed about it. And I met with a business owner. And I said the impossible before them. I told them about the story, about our journey. I said, I'm going to ask you, pray about this one thing. I've never asked anybody in this way. I need 3 years' salary in cash for this transition so the church don't have to carry 2 pastors. Because I know it's not about carrying 2 pastors. It's securing the story and making it fair on the one who comes and follows. Because church, here's the truth. Any pastor that stays for 25 years, and by the way, there's a finite amount, 0.000. The longest pastor stays between 4 and 7 years. Anyone who stays for 25 years and longer, the person that follows after them has got a 99% chance of failing, because they compare you to that person and they don't want anything to change. And that's why we're not going to do that. We're going to journey together, because this is a good house to grow old in, and I'm going to assure that is going to be fun till the end, but it's a good house to grow up in. Pastor Doug is going to ensure, and that is where we are. So when that donor said yes, and here it is, it's a divine thread that you can't make up, because it does not make sense logically, but God had it in mind. So in the midst of it all, Jesus is the head of the church. Here we are. I know I'm confident in the mystery of God. And you are a sacred thread to it all. Today is the biggest day in 25 years for me, because I waited 5 years to come to this place of peace. Do you know what joy it is when you are making a huge decision, but you've never been at so much peace? That's a sign of God's grace. So build your church. Build your church. Build it from the ground up. It's your church. Build your church. Build your church. Build it from the ground up upon this rock. Upon this rock. You will build your church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. And we bind and loose, we proclaim your truth, and in Jesus' name you will not fail. Now before I bless you, I want to look at every one of you sitting on the stage and honor you, your journey, all the turns and the toils. Jim, you've been here the longest that I can remember with Ernie. And when I arrived, you wanted to quit every Sunday after the first message. He would call me out and says, I'm done, I'm never coming back. And then I would pray with him that week, and he's back. And then I go after 6 weeks, I said, Jim, you can't quit every Sunday after the first service. Quit Monday. It's kind of hard on me. And Jim has been serving the Rogers, Tony, the Falcos, all of you standing here. And I want to acknowledge all those who did serve that are not on the stage. They are honored. They are honored. So may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God the Father and and the beautiful intimacy of His Spirit be with you. May the Lord bless you and keep. May His presence hold us in unity so that we don't spread or allow rumors and nonsense to spread. May it not be like that among us. And may God keep you deeply engrafted in the garment of His family, because you are here because He wants you here for His purpose, His delight, and all that's coming. God bless you, church. We will see you next weekend. God bless you.